Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Hank Phillippi Ryan, and I am so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and that is when we on A Mighty Blaze bring you a fantastic new author with a book that we think you should look at, and today is no different. As I said, I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14 going on 15 novels of suspense. I'm also the investigative reporter for Channel 7 here in Boston, winning 37 Emmys for investigative reporting. So happy about that, but superly happy because my new book, One Wrong Word, which is weird. You see how that's kind of great, comes out. It's disturbing, isn't it? Comes out February the 6th about rumors and justice and revenge and power. And I cannot wait for you to read that. But that is not the point of today. Today, I am so pleased and so honored to bring you Ed Brubaker, who with Sean Phillips has a new graphic novel called Where the Body Was. And I have to tell you just quickly before we get to this, it was only a couple of hours ago that I thought, oh, Where the Body Was, now I get the title. So that was sort of a delayed reaction coolness. I have to say, I just gave it a standing ovation again. It comes out January 16th. It is profound and scary and sinister and thought-provoking. It's deep and a terrific mystery at the same time. And I'm not quite sure how Ed and Sean managed to make that happen. And that is what I want to talk with Ed a little bit about today. One more thing about this. It just got a starred review from Library Journal, which is fantastic. And it says, a fast-paced mystery propelled by a fascinating cast of characters that builds to a profoundly moving and deeply romantic climax. Absolutely not to be missed. What did you think when you're so famous and you're so cool and you're so successful. Do you still wait with trepidation for those kinds of reviews, or are you past that?
No, I try not to put too much stock into reviews, but then you always want to get good reviews. So it's like that weird, the emotional, egotistical seesaw that all writers are on where, oh, I don't care about reviews, but if I got nothing but bad reviews, I'd be miserable. So
yeah, those bad ones sort of stick with you. But when someone says absolutely not to be missed, you've still got, your heart has got to sort of flutter at that.
Yeah. Sean Phillips and I have been doing comics together for over 20 years now. And I don't think either of us has ever felt like we've made it. I think we always are still feeling like we want to impress people more than we did the last time,
Don't you think that's a sign of a successful person, that, you raise the bar and you want to be better and you're sort of watch me dive. This time I'm going to do a cooler thing than I did before.
I think it is, but it might also just be a sign of a person who's obsessed and nothing's ever good enough for them.
We're all a little neurotic about this.
Yeah.
The idea that we could challenge ourselves and try something that's even more complex and gorgeous and meaningful. That's one of the things that keeps me going, isn't it to you?
Yeah. Well, what I've learned sort of over the years is, I've made a living as a writer for over 20 years now, just exclusively. And what I've found, the longer that I did it, the more like deciding what I wanted to write next or what I needed to write next became like the most important thing, more than worrying about, is this a thing people are going to want to read, or is this a thing that an editor will like, or any of that stuff. It was always about like, okay, well, we have, this limited time on, to be able to do things in life, and I have this opportunity to do anything I want to do with Sean and graphic novels. So it's always like, okay, well, what's the best use of that? Like, what is it that is sort of like resonant to me, or that maybe will feel like, some form of therapy to me, maybe.
Well, and I think, interestingly, listening to what you're saying and having read this, I think what you're saying is all in this novel. That's what this is about, to realize where we are and what we have, and that we have this one life and deciding how to spend that. And we sort of don't know how that's going to evolve. I see everybody coming. Let me just say welcome. Here's Gretchen Koss. Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here's Renee Herskowitz. And so many more people are coming today. It's marvelous to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time. If you don't know about A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic, amazingly enough, by the powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, to keep us meeting new authors, to keep us discovering new novels, to keep the writing and reading community together. And we are still going strong. And that is why we are here today on Crime Time with Ed Brubaker. Let me tell you a little bit about Ed. He is one of the most acclaimed of authors, writers in comics, winning 5 Best Writer Eisner and Harvey Awards in the last 15 years. That is incredible. His best-selling work with Sean Phillips on Criminal, Reckless, Kill or Be Killed, and The Fade Out has been translated around the world to great acclaim. And Marvel's movies featuring his co-creation, The Winter Soldier, have all been international blockbusters. Brubaker lives in California with his wife and dog, where he continues to work in comics, film, and television. And I will tell you all that Ed worked us in today on Crime Time. He has meetings up one side and down the other.
I don't know if that's that charming equality.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's marvelous that you worked us in today, and we are so thrilled to be talking about Where the Body Was today. And Ed is giving away a copy of this book, you lucky people. Not this one.
Yeah, the hardback.
But I'll give a real
version.
One.
The hardback has the map at the beginning is the end papers on the hardback.
I'll show the map at the beginning, and we'll go to that. I mean, look at this is the beginning, which is amazing. Just tells you right what it is right then. And then here is Pelican Road, summer 1984. We'll talk about this book in a minute. I have several things. Kathy says I would pick up the book just based on the cover. Absolutely. So noir and so perfect. Talk a little bit about, though, how does a graphic novel work? How do you and Sean work together to create this?
Well, Sean and I started working together around the same time I started dating my wife, which is like in 1999, actually. So they're the 2 longest relationships of my life. One of whom I almost never speak to. We just email, and that's Sean.
That's Sean,
not my wife. We talk all the time, but we met while we were both working work for hire books for Marvel and DC, doing like superhero stuff, and we just really hit it off doing a project together and decided we wanted to break away and just not work in that world and just sort of create our own things. And so our process is probably not that different than a lot of other people in comics. Like when I come up with an idea for like a project or a book, now we exclusively do graphic novels. I'll sort of give him the gist of what it's about. And, if I've got a title for it, I'll tell him that. He does all the art and design. His son is now our colorist. We've been working together so long that the kid who used to pose for photos for all the kids is now the guy coloring our comics. So, but I'll give him the gist of it. And then that's really all he wants to know. And then I write it sort of in script form, almost like a screenplay, but dividing it into panels, like this panel is this and this panel is that, and this is a wide shot, and and I'll send it to him like a chapter at a time that way, and then he starts drawing it as I'm.
So you were saying, for instance, you send what is a wide shot and what is a close up, for instance.
Yeah, like I'll tell him like the top panel on that page should be a full tier, and like something like that. Like we get into technical jargon, but we've been working together for so long that it's really just this smooth back and forth with, but it's somewhere in between like prose writing and screenwriting, like comic book writing. Like you have to isolate the moments more, but you also get to use time the same way that a prose writer does, where you can compress and expand things. And as in a film, everything, you can't control time in a film really, the way like, cause I'll get to a passage in a book I love and I'll read that page over and over again, and so with our books, I try to make sure we're giving people those those moments.
Oh, yes. You know what? I definitely want to talk about that in a minute, because that was something that really touched me as I read this book, and sort of opened a new world for me in reading it. And I want to talk about that in a minute. So, but going back to how you two work together, you talk about sending a chapter at a time. But
Yeah.
tell us what the big story is, and then we can talk about how you get there and then how that's presented. So this is a story about murder in the suburbs, essentially.
Yeah. Well, Where the Body was partly inspired by, do you know Sarah Gran?
Sure.
Yeah, like Sarah and I were talking about the old Dell Mapback books, and how we both really wanted to do a book with that kind of design in it. And I realized, like, well, I control my publishing. Like, I could come up with a thing where we did like a Mapback, and then as I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, it'd be cool if it was the end papers. And then I just thought, well, what would be a good story for that? Like, because I was trying to figure out what to write for our next book when we were getting near the end of the previous book that we did that came out in the summer. Like, Sean and I do a book about twice a year now. So we pretty much work, from one book into the next. And so with Where the Body Was, I just suddenly, I thought of that map, and I started thinking, well, what would be the story that tied everything together, and who are the people who live on the street? And then I just basically sat down with a notebook for like 3 days and filled up about 150 pages of notes about all the different people who live on the street. And some of it started from fragments of stories I'd been trying to figure out how to tell before, like the policeman who lives on the block, and the therapist and his wife. And there are a lot of little bits and pieces of things that I'd been trying to get to that I couldn't figure out a way to work into a story or write a whole story about. And I realized, like, oh, I've got all these different houses. I can put these different little stories in these different houses, and then sort of show them be like, kind of ricocheting off of each other. And
so it sounds like almost that the story came out of a setting, or that the setting was the template for putting the people into to interact. And I want you to see, all at the beginning, we see who some of the characters are.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, who decides what they looked like, Tony or Dr. Melville or Lila or Ranko? Who I mean,
who decides
like this?
Well, I'll send Sean notes on like what they should look like, and then he'll, just draw them. And, unless they're wildly different than what I was picturing, usually it's Sean who's doing all of that. And I'll, like for fashion sense or period piece stuff, I'll do a lot of research, and Sean will do a lot of research to, what people were wearing or what scooters were like, and, like that kind of stuff, like just trying to get like the period detail right, especially since, this all takes place over the course of, 3 months in the summer of 1984. So
and
it really needed to feel like that.
Take us there, and it's so evocative of that. So but in your brain, in your writer brain, are you thinking the story, or are you thinking the whole thing?
Well, I think first it started from the idea of a map, but I knew underneath that what I wanted to write about was sort of how love and relationships and obsession, and the way that we feel about love and obsession and relationships and stuff changes from the point where we're teenagers to the point where we're in our 50s or 60s, or, how these things, like throughout the course of our lives, we have the same desires, but the different approaches to them, or just the way that, loss changes you over time, or just acceptance of time passing sort of can make things, I don't know. I've been, we've had a lot of, since the pandemic, obviously, but been a lot of things about getting into my 50s and, losing parents and losing friends, and, being in hospitals a lot with family members and things like that. And it really, you can just wake up one day and realize that kind of the things that you thought mattered the most at 25 or 30 don't really matter at all, and that, like, the people that you've built your life around that you sometimes take for granted are like much more important. And I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to write a crime story that sort of was really a love story, but that also grappled with, the reality of our existence as people.
I mean, I think one of the things that affected me so much about this book, we're talking about Where the Body Was, a graphic novel by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. One of the things that affected me so much is how gorgeously you took sort of superhero comics and the Twilight Zone and Our Town. I mean, Our Town is what this is, and made that be touching and moving. I mean, it's a great murder mystery as well, with every element of a terrific mystery, with all the clues and all the characters and, all the motivations and points of view. But it's also gorgeously philosophical and hauntingly thought-provoking. And I wonder, who do you think this is? Who is this for? Because who reads graphic novels now? I will start because of this. I mean, I think.
Oh, was this your first graphic novel?
It is.
Oh my God!
I read Alex Segura. I read Alex Segura's book, which is not totally a graphic novel, but but no, it's new. And this isn't about me, but I grew up reading every comic book in the universe. If I had my comics, I would be so rich. I and I'm, Legion of Superheroes and Justice League of America. Those were, I loved them all. And I moved away from it and then Mad Magazine. I was a big devotee of Mad Magazine.
Yeah, me too.
Were you? Okay. That's
of course. I was a comic kid.
We'll talk about that someday. But so you have made a movie on paper.
Well, I don't think of it that way, really. I think comics to me feel closer to books than they do to movies or to TV or anything like that, because there's still a one-on-one relationship between the book and the reader. And every reader is going to get a different experience. You're not in an audience with 1,000 people where they're laughing at a joke you didn't think was funny, or you're crying at a thing and they're not getting it. Like everybody's experience with the book is different. And so comics to me are this unique art form that, when I was a kid, I would have, told you were crazy if that I was going to grow up in a world where comics were an accepted art form. That dominated our pop culture, to the point where people call me up to talk about my IP, but for me, comics is really about, just writing those scenes and creating these moments with these people. And, it's just, I think, there have been times where I wondered if I should try to write a novel or something, just because I feel like my comics, when I write them, it's more like writing a novel than I'm not writing it the same way that you write like a monthly issue of Captain America. I'm really thinking of it as, a graphic novel has about the amount of story as, a short novel or a novella or something.
Well, this is what I was thinking about, and how superly difficult.
It's not
write this, because it's a number of words for the same power.
It's a trick. And I try to tell people this when they're moving from like comics to screenwriting, that the biggest thing you're going to notice is that, like, if you're good at comic book writing, which, I think I'm pretty good at it, the dialogue sounds real when the people are reading it, but if they were to say it out loud, they realize that, people would say a lot more ums and go and run on set, and people don't talk the way as concisely as they do in our comics. But I always still try to strive for like a real sense of realism. But what I love about comics is the mix of the picture and the words next to each other, like that scene you were holding up where she's hugging him on the scooter and all of his text next to it. Because it's this beautiful little moment, but everything he's saying is about that moment of unrequited love where it's wrapped around you, but it's not really yours, and how that really shapes you as a teenager. Because every person, all of us have had that person that you have that strange obsession crush on that pretends they don't notice. Like everybody's experienced that in growing up.
The fullness of a graphic novel also is that, first of all, just to say, such applause for so few words saying so much. And it's got to be incredibly difficult. And then internal dialogue becomes the pictures. So we know how someone is feeling by how they look in the picture.
Yeah, it's a lot about finding that balance between what are you showing and what are you saying? How much are you letting the art do? Are you saying one thing in the narration and then showing something completely different in the picture so that a character's lying to themselves about a thing? You can do things in comics that you can't do in any other art form, really. Like that chapter, which I don't know if you were going to get to it, but there's a chapter towards the end of that book where we see a character go from middle age to the end of her life while she's telling you a story, because she ages 10 years between each panel. And that's a thing you can really only do in comics effectively.
Yeah, I mean, in film you could dissolve, but it wouldn't be as powerful.
Yeah, it's not the same as because it would be, her voice would change, and it was just. But I really, I love the language of comics for being able to do that, and I think, to your point about the story in Where the Body Was being a murder mystery, it is, but it's kind of like a cut up too, because you're getting the story in all these different fragments that. I don't even know what page the dead body finally appears on, but it's not in the first half of the book.
No. But talk a little bit about that, because the points of view, there are a dozen points of view.
Like 8 or 9. Yeah, it's a lot.
But it's a lot, but it's not one bit complicated. It is so seamless and so easy to read. And because you're seeing the world through the eyes of and I just want you to give you some ideas of how this looks and how, that's just a random page that I picked. I've totally forgot what I was saying. I was just applauding you like crazy. But you talk about the language of comics. That line really resonated with me as well. The language of comics, the words and the pictures are more than they are separately.
Yeah, the thing that I noticed, and this is really informative to me, you'll know the work of Richard Stark, Donald Westlake. My friend Darwin Cook, who passed away a number of years ago, the last big project he did in his life was adapting 4 of the Parker novels into graphic novels.
Oh.
And that was really informative to me as a teaching tool to show, sort of, because I knew those Parker books so well as novels, and I knew how long they were and how much detail was in them, and to see them distilled into like a 180-page graphic novel, I thought, well, that's about the same length as the book. And I realized so much of the work that he was doing was drawing the locations instead of describing them. And the art really does allow for so much that you can, when doing it right, sometimes a comic can feel like you read it and it's just like over in a second. But when you do it right, I think comics have an ability that a scene can have like sort of 3 layers of depth, almost like the thing they're saying, the thing the drawing is doing, and then, the thing that the author is intending below it too.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, actually, is that one of the gorgeous things about this book is that you can read it in so many ways and at so many different speeds. You can power through it for the story.
Yeah.
You can go back and savor the pictures. And then you can learn as you're reading it the second time how the pictures really enhance the words. And it becomes something different and richer and bigger every time you read it.
That's what I always strive for, is because I love books where I go back and want to reread them, or movies where I want to watch it over and over again and notice new details. And it's a thing that, as we've started, Sean and I, getting into the graphic novels and longer books, we really, I strive to make sure that they're worth rereading, that you'll get more out of it, that there'll be storylines that you didn't totally notice. There's a storyline I think only one person has even noticed in one of our books, The Fade Out, that's like a 40s Hollywood book. And someone mentioned something to me about it. And I was like, oh, you're the first person to ever notice that character was a lesbian, like, but it's totally in there if you're paying attention. But it's like there's also 8 other characters running around. So
and characters have asides, and they have thoughts, and they have things in their lives that they don't mention, but that you see in the background. The lift of an eyebrow, or the sarcasm or double meaning, and it's all so gorgeously in there. Renee is asking, can teenagers read it too? And this takes me to a question. Mm-hmm. One of the things, and I'll get to that, one of the things is that one of the things that you give up in a graphic novel is that I can imagine Kinsey Malone looking however I want.
Yeah.
Sue Grafton didn't tell me how Kinsey Malone looked.
Yeah.
But in a graphic novel, you are telling me, you are showing me how these people look and how they live and what their houses are, and what their expressions are. We talk a little bit about that. There are the drawings are. And also depending on whether the drawings are sort of sweet, as some are, or black and white, or in color, and some of them are very raw. I would not show this. There are pages I would not show, Renee, on this family show. So,
I mean, it would depend on the age of the teenager. I think if it's a teenager that's allowed to watch R-rated movies that have nudity in them and swearing, then okay. But that would be on a we never. I think we're always kind of classy, but there's definitely a character in this story who her story is much more along the line of a bodice ripper.
Yes.
And
even in a bodice ripper, though, and we'll just touch on this a little bit. I can picture that in one way, and someone else might picture that in a much more graphic way, and someone else might picture that in a much less graphic way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You and Sean have decided how we will see it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, no one's ever asked me about that before.
Is that good or bad?
I always just assume that we're doing it in a way that's good. I hope. Like I always am, I want to be able to give the books to like my family and my friends without, anything being like, hey man, my kid looked at that. Though I did have a friend whose 8-year-old daughter brought one of our books to school and got in trouble recently. But I didn't tell her. And there you
have your answer, Renee. The 8-year-old brought the book to school and got in trouble. That's all. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
I've just marked some pages in here. I'm looking to see why I marked them. I mean, and these pages are gorgeous, and I hope you look for them when you read this, about talking about the Twilight Zone and how someone wishes they could go back and hear the distant voices from the past. It's so sad. Like us right now, someday we'll be those distant voices from the past. And that's just so touching to read. What does it feel like to write that?
I mean, I think that was really the whole point of writing the book to me, in a way, was sort of I think you get to a point in your life, probably somewhere in your mid 40s, where you find yourself thinking about the early days of your life a lot more than you did in your 30s, and it's like you have those moments where you remember the way things felt when you were 18, that they just don't feel that way anymore at 57, and I think a lot of it was sort of trying to sort of dig into that nostalgia for that time where you were young and crazy and free, but also sort of tie it into that those times weren't necessarily always better, and that being that young, crazy, and passionate about everything isn't necessarily the road to happiness, and that you just, life happens to you. It's like that John Lennon quote about life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And that was really, to me, that was kind of the point of it, was that acknowledgement of, you never know what's going to end up being the thing that matters the most to you in your life, or that has the most impact to you in your life. And, and for me, over the last 3 or 4 years, I've really come to appreciate the things that that are in my life, and let go of some of my nostalgia for the past in a way where I can not judge myself for my stupid youth, but just sort of be like, well, that's kind of how it all had to go for me to be here.
And you wouldn't have turned out like this had that not happened.
Yeah, exactly. All the awful things that happened to you in your childhood. I mean, I'm a writer, so that's just all, grist for the mill. But for all of us, like if you've ended up in a place where, you're, it's just a quote about the wicked broke age barriers. I forget what
the childhood thing is interesting too. Where did I see this? Maybe it was in the John le Carré documentary, where he said something like, an author's childhood is the credit balance of their adulthood.
And I think that's true. I had when I tell people about my childhood, they always think that I seem much more well-adjusted than I should be. And I think, well, you should read my books.
Then you'll know. When you read this book, this is my last question. When you read this book, and I know you will, look for this. What do you call them? Frame, square, panel. Look for this panel. That was one of my most profound moments. I'm not going to read it to you because I want you all to read it yourself. Look for Where the Body Was by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. How do you want people to feel when, this is my first graphic novel, as I admitted to you, and you have completely won me over with it, with its power, with its philosophy, with the gorgeous art, with the succinct, choosing every word to be the most powerful word it could possibly be, and so successfully, and it's so thought-provoking and haunting. Can you talk a little bit about getting new fans and what that feels like?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's amazing. Your response to it was exactly the response I was hoping for from people, just the way that it's impacted you and stayed with you, and the way you were just talking about it, or before we got on the live part, like that's the dream, is like that I want. And Sean and I think are maybe a little bit different in comics than some of the people that work in the sort of more mainstream comics field, in that we've been trying for 15, 16 years now to do just books you could give to anybody. Mm-hmm. That it started out when I noticed at comic conventions, people would tell us like, oh, I bought one of your books for my grandfather for Christmas, or, oh, my dad thinks comics are dumb, but I gave him one of your books and he loved it. And so we've always been that reader looking for like the general audience. My dream is literally to be at an airport bookstore, just because, but I always want, like I love a thriller that sticks with you, or that makes you look at your own life, so, you just pointed to the most important panel to me in the entire book. So like, obviously that book, like hit you correctly, but you can never tell how art's gonna, how people are going to respond to it. I noticed, a friend of mine who I think is our biggest fan, like his initial response to the book was that he wasn't sure he got it, and he had to read it a second time to really see what we were trying to do, because it's so different than some of the other stuff we've done structurally, because it jumps around in time and space, and But
again, you have a picture. You can know where you are. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's insidious. The book is insidious, and I say that in the most complimentary way, because it looks easy. You pick up a book that's pictures and very few words, and you think, oh, this is very accessible to me. I can read this very quickly, and it must be a good story. It's a comic. I love comics.
Yeah.
And then you realize, wow, it's still easy to read, but it's much deeper than it looks. So I think what a mad success this is.
Well, thank you so much. That's really flattering. That's kind of what I always try to go for. And like I said, I always want to do the books where someone reads it a second time or a third time and it's like, oh, I didn't notice that part, or, oh my God, that hits even harder, like because we spend so much time, especially Sean takes 6 months to draw one of these books. And, I don't want it to just be, oh, that was fun, and they put it down.
Yeah, no, it's not like, I mean, it's not tossed aside, like, not that you would toss aside a
Yeah.
comic. When they used to be 10 cents, you might be more
Yeah.
likely to do that. Does Sean, do you ever get, I'm sorry, I'm asking you one more question. Do you ever see a picture and say to Sean, I don't know, do you edit video? Do you edit your pictures as well as the words?
Every now and then there'll be something like a cover sketch or something that we'll go back and forth on, but pretty much for the pages, unless he's drawn someone yelling and I wrote that they were whispering or something and he just read it wrong. Usually it's pretty much he'll send me the pencils as he's drawing them sometimes so that I can see the blue line version before he draws it in ink. So every now and then, but really we're a pretty well-oiled machine at this point in time.
So it goes pencil, then ink, then color.
Yeah. The coloring is the last thing that gets done, and Sean does all the lettering on our stuff too. So he really controls, and he designs the books, and we work on that together. And so he really controls the whole package. And I mean, we're to the point with our deal with our publisher, we even choose like the paper stock it's going to get printed on and stuff. And so we have a lot of control on that side.
Well, it's beautiful. And when you all get this book, and I know you will, and one of you is going to win it in about 30 seconds. When you get this book, you'll see there's so much even more to it than we've talked about. There's a lot of breaking of the fourth wall and talking to the reader and gorgeous hints. And
it really,
the whole thing is beautiful.
When I was describing it to my wife, when I was working on it, like what it was going to be, she said, "Oh, kind of like that movie Shortcuts." And I thought, "Oh yeah, kind of." I was like really inspired by like the way Tom Perrotta will write some of his books, where he breaks up and tells you the story between 8 different characters.
Yeah.
I just have always loved that. Jim Thompson did that in one of his books. That was one of I was.
But in a novel, it's really more complicated to do, but because sometimes people will think, now who's talking? Who's pointing?
Yeah.
You don't do it well. But
here you have the people.
Easy because you're seeing it.
Yeah. And sometimes they just stop in the middle of it and turn and just talk directly to you. So
that's great. It's absolutely great. You will love this. Where the Body Was. Don't give this to your young teenagers. Give this to wise, smart adults. Where the Body Was by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. It's absolutely gorgeous and thought-provoking. And one of you will win it. We will spin the wheel of fun right now. Do we have any questions? I'm not sure we do. I was seeing people say, "You're making me cry." So many layers, says Vicki Gregory. We'll definitely be reading and looking at Where the Body Was. And Kathy Lanigan says, "I'm sold. I'll be reading Where the Body Was, my first graphic book." So
that's amazing.
You have won over the Crime Timers, and you have gotten so many new fans.
Awesome.
So let's do the
let's
giveaway.
do it.
And we'll draw to see who the winner is. I always think there should be music here, but nobody will ever put music for me. And the winner is Kathy Lanigan. Wonderful.
All right. Well, now you don't have to buy it.
No, you should still buy it. Give it to someone who you should all still buy it, and you will get an extra secret copy that we will send you. You'll get some information about who to what is the word? Email is the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Email me. And I will tell Ed, and Ed will send me the book, and I will send you the book, and you will get it. You lucky Kathy. I'm so glad that you won. Ed, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a life-changing interview for me.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks. And thanks for reading the book. And I'm glad that it landed with you. You're my ideal audience.
That's so great. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says that. That's really great. You all, let me tell you very quickly before I let Ed go. Next week, we have the Tuesday off. So I won't see you on the 26th, but we'll be back on Tuesday, January the 2nd, with 2 books. First, and this is the one I'm reading right now, Anna O by Matthew Blake. Look at that cover, you all. That is very, very slinky. So I cannot wait to read this book. And then we'll be at 4:00 with the fantastic Tess Gerritsen and her new The Spy Coast, about a group of retired CIA agents who all move to Maine. And then guess what happens? They have to go back into the field. And she's great and you will love it. So we will see you at 3 and 4 on Tuesday, January 2nd. So that means Happy New Year, you all. Happy New Year, Ed. And your book comes out the 16th of January.
Yeah, it's available in comic stores now and in bookstores in the 16th.
Okay,
With
so
the different
available in
distributors.
comic stores now,
Yeah,
bookstores on January 16th. Is
yeah.
there going to be a soft cover like this and a hardcover, or is it all hardcover?
It's a hardcover right now, but yeah, we'll have a soft cover out in probably a year or so.
Great. Congratulations. Well, let us know when you do your next book. We will invite you back. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for
Oh,
being
thank
here
you. Thanks for
today.
having me.
And thank you all for being here today. Happiest of everything, happiest of New Year's. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you on January 2nd.